Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at the Beta FPV Pavo 20 Pro. This is the '04 edition. Of course, there has been an '03 edition, and then they had, what was the NightFire edition, which they're all the same except for the mounts, of course, '03 versus '04 mount, and then the NightFire edition had a specialized set of LED lights around it. So we're not going to go through all the traditional text and specs and stuff like that that I have in the past. If you're wondering about batteries and stuff like that, the ones that kind of fit down here, I discussed that in the original video, the Pavo 20 Pro brushless. As you can see here, the one thing that I did when I mounted up the LED lights was I took a small piece of electrical tape after I had wedged the connector between the flight controller and the LED lights. I wedged the connector here in the back of it, and then I taped over that just to make sure that the connector didn't come out and get in the prop line. But we will be measuring and taking a look at the flight in several different wind conditions. Here is a quick side-by-side profile view of the two different editions here for '03 and '04. Of course, '04 is on the right, '03 is on the left, and we are going to weigh them momentarily. The '03 edition weighed 111.87 grams, and the '04 edition is slightly less at 110.53. We could probably attribute some portion of the difference in weight. This '03 version has those small, tiny, short whip antennas, and we have the stock DJI '04 antennas on this one. So I do suspect that this one should weigh slightly more than the '03 because the camera is bigger and we have a bigger camera mount and stuff like that. I did see earlier that if you wanted to transition your '03 version into the '04 version, they do sell this mount for your VTX and camera separately, and it will fit directly on it. Like I said, everything else is the same mounting screws. Everything else is really the same. As we head into the flight, this is a 67-degree day, Fahrenheit that is, 6 to 10 miles an hour, and just a little proof of concept, I'm starting out with the DVR here, and we do have rock steady on. If you're not familiar with the Pavo Pro brushless, of course it does not come natively with a mount for an external HD camera, whether that's an Insta360 Go, Go 2, a naked DJ, or a naked GoPro of some sort, or any other sort of what I think you would want to possibly mount. I mean, if you wanted to mount one, because the '04 footage is quite good. So depending upon your needs, that is, you may have to DIY, 3D print, design your own mount if you wanted to run an external HD camera, because natively, as you've already seen, with both editions, they don't come ready for that. Not really for that. With the prop size that you have, if you do mount an external HD camera, you'll want to keep it as light as possible. With all the extra weight that you add to this, the flight time will come down. And here around the 1 minute mark, we will be transitioning from the DVR footage, and we'll be going to the rocksteady footage. Now, I put in my notes on this day, while it is a nice sunny day, and I am running the Goggles 3, by the way. That's why you'll see 60 megabits down there in the bottom. But I did note that I did feel this wind. Even though it's pretty low for my area, 6 to 10 miles an hour, I did feel the wind on my body. So it didn't seem dead calm, because sometimes the weather service will have a weather measure or a wind measurement of 6 miles an hour, and it will feel just about dead calm. That's not the case with this particular day. But I wanted to give you a flight sample with both the DVR footage as well as the onboard storage footage that does have rocksteady involved. And here, after we finish this little swoopy move down into the yard, we'll move into another slow cinematic style sort of flight footage. And at that point, I will report some flight times as well with this '04 edition. This flight is 20 miles per hour. That's the weather data. Again, we're going to start off with the DVR footage, so you can see in the top left-hand corner, you can see my throttle value. I think that's what a lot of people get concerned about. My run times, I'm not showing complete cinematic sort of full flights. I did run them fully, but just, who wants to watch 32 minutes of flat flying in my backyard? So this is more flight testing than it is actual cinematic sort of flight, because it's not all that good to look at. So while you're watching this, and we're going to switch over here at about the 1 minute mark to the rocksteady VTX recorded footage, we have flight times. I did try this on the 850 milliamp GNB 3S battery, 6 minutes and 30 seconds, but on a 720, that's the red label GNB 720, I got 7 minutes. So I got more flight time with a smaller battery. And for those that aren't, heavily experienced or just hadn't been through the process of trying out different batteries, just because you increase battery size, that does not equal getting more flight time all the time. As you increase battery size, if everything is as it should be, you're increasing battery weight, and you could be decreasing the efficiency of the quad, and that's what the 850 did. If we drop down to the 660, in my case that was the yellow labeled G&B 660, I got about 6 minutes on that flight. 605, wasn't unusual to see across my several flights. By the way, I use 3 batteries, and I fly it 3 times, and I try to do them all on the same day, but in this case I didn't do them all on the same day, because once I got down to the 660s, I had to shut myself down and had to go take care of something with, I can't remember if it was family or work or just back from lunch or what have you. But I went further, went down to the 550, that is the Beta FPV Lava battery, and I got 6 minutes on that battery. So again, I got about the same amount of flight time on a much smaller capacity battery. Again, 660 versus the 550, 660 of the G&B versus the 550 of the Beta FPV Lava battery, and I got nearly the same flight time. Then I dropped down to a Tattoo 450, and I got 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and that's all this sort of slow, cruisy sort of flight. And I've gone over my time as far as viewing this particular flight, so we need to move on to one more. Again, I'm showing the goggle view so you can see that I do have Rocksteady turned on, and you get to see that we're recording at 1080p, 60 frames per second. I set those almost all the time there, just so I can save recording space, because when I'm doing a bunch of different flights, I need the recording space. You probably would want to set yours up differently, especially if you're wanting the highest quality onboard recording. You may notice in this particular flight the 20 megabits per second. I have had that called out in comments. I've had somebody say that it's a bug with DJI, that sometimes it will drop down to just 20 megabits per second. And that's, I didn't really notice it in the goggles at this time, but you can see it down on the lower right where it's now saying 19, 18. But I've heard that's a bug, and I don't know that to be the case, or if it was a heat issue that maybe I had sitting too long, because I am recording the flight audio on a secondary camera, so it takes me a moment to get everything set up. You saw it flash red there as I went around the corner, and now we're back up to 16 megabits per second. So weird stuff sometimes. Maybe it is a bug, maybe it isn't. I'm not that well informed, but some of you out there might be that well informed. So for the faster flight, which I will be coming up here momentarily while you get a better look at this flight. Oh, and I don't think I reported the temperature, 61 degrees at this time, 3 miles per hour, and I noted on my notes that it was still. So this is probably the ideal sort of filming conditions. You want lower wind so you can get the smoothest shot possible for filmography purposes or cinematography. And this was one of the few days I had that. You can see the sun is relatively low. This is an after work flight, probably somewhere in the nature of about 6:15. I can't say for certain because, again, I was flying this flight as well as the 450s on that same sort of evening. It was a little later in the day, so the wind had come down a little bit, which isn't necessarily unusual, at least for my area. I don't follow the weather patterns in other areas all that closely. The yard actually looks a little bit better than it does right now because we just got it mowed today. Yeah, we have a mowing service. I found, it was about a year ago, that if I go out and I mow the yard, we have a push mower. Now that my son, who's a sophomore in college, he was my helper mowing the yard for several years while he was in high school, but I went out and mowed it, and my knees are kind of wrecked for about 3-4 days. I kind of hobble along like I need to be on crutches or in a wheelchair or something. So my wife finally forced me to cave in, and we just pay somebody to mow the lawn. And man, are they efficient. 45 minutes, and they've trimmed and blown off all the cement from the trimmings, and they've mowed and bagged it up, and boom, gone. 45 minutes, in and out, 3 guys. So fast. I spent like 4 hours out there doing it myself, maybe even longer. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's move on to the faster flight, which is my preferred flight style. Okay, so our weather information on this faster flight, I'm running the Beta FPV Lava 550, and the temperature is 84 degrees. We had a little bit of a heat wave. It has since calmed back down a little bit. I'm a little shaky on the sticks there, so don't judge the quad too much. I already showed the slow flight, so I kind of have to. I found, well, I'll talk about it more in a minute, about my shakiness or my less than sticky, steady fingers. But the winds were actually kind of high, 12 to 15 miles an hour. So about the kind of my switching over from the Zorro, which for quite a while now has been one of my favorite radios, and it is still my favorite radio. But as many people have noted, the Zorro does have short flight time. I think one of the things they could have helped us in the design element would have been to have a smaller screen. But I said flight time, didn't I? I meant battery life. You know, your batteries just kind of wear out, or they get low, and then you have to recharge them real quickly. So I have switched over to the Radio Master, the GX12, full time, and it's probably been about 6 weeks. But I did find that the stock stick ends, because I'm a hybrid pincher, I believe is what people call it, I've had troubles keeping my fingers in precisely the right spot, and sometimes in flights I'm having to adjust my fingers while I'm flying, and I think that's a little bit of what was going on there at the beginning of that flight. And now we see that I've kind of gotten back to my normal sorts of controls and relatively smooth lines, at least in my skill set, as far as I'm normally capable of. I have switched over to some 3D printed stick ends. I believe these are the Norway Spruce Medium from TinyWhoop.com. Unfortunately, I can't be 100% certain, because I bought, at the time I was looking at those sorts of stick ends, I bought like 4 different sets from 3 different sites. So don't run out and buy those in case, do your own shopping, do your own looking at those, but I do believe that is what they are, but I just don't have 100% confidence, because it was more than 2 years ago when I bought those and tried those out. So, as far as flight capabilities, it flies similarly or exactly the same as the 03 edition or the NightFire edition does. Of course, you might be able to help yourself out a little bit by decreasing the weight in various manners that you might be able to find, whether it's to replace the stock antennas with smaller whip antennas, if that still works for you. You might be able to do something else with decreasing the weight of the video and camera mount. Leaving the LED lights off would save you some weight. Running them without them on, because I did leave them on all these particular flights, and I like that. I don't like having the LEDs on actually for my neighbors, because sometimes they want to watch, and they'll tell me that they can see the ones with LEDs on it during the day better than they can others. And like I said, my neighbors sometimes like to watch. They have texted me when I've been out there flying, and they would be texting me that they're watching from, inside their own homes or something like that. If you're not aware, I text all my neighbors when I'm planning to fly on a day at a time, just to give them plenty of notice that I'm planning to go out, and if you don't want me to, please let me know, and I will certainly compromise with them. But the flight ended 3 minutes and 10 seconds on that faster flight, but I didn't get the battery back up to 3.5 volts per cell, so probably needed to shorten that a little bit. And when I say something flies fine, that can, depending upon kind of your bend in life, that may sound negative, but to me, that means it flies as I would expect it to fly. It doesn't fly bad. If something, we don't get that much that flies bad anymore. Usually it has other shortcomings. It's not the PID tune or something like that. So don't misinterpret my saying for it flying fine. But, I flew this one. I did not ever build up the NightFire version. I didn't see a point for that. I think I actually still have it. Yeah, this one here was supposed to be the NightFire edition one. I never put it together. I didn't understand why I would. So I don't think you would go wrong if you're wanting something with prop protection in this size and you're wanting to run either an 03 or 04. Of course, I kind of have to clarify this, but I don't want to get too long in the tooth, because you can really go down a rabbit hole. People ask me about my preferences quite a bit, and whenever it comes to my preferences, unless I'm flying in the house, I am always going to prefer something without prop protection. But if you're looking for something that flies out, that we would primarily fly outside, and it has prop protection, and you're wondering if this flies good and fun, and you can't quite tell from the video, probably because you're getting started in FPV and maybe don't have a full grasp. Yeah, these are good fun. I can do all the things I would typically do. It's just not as agile, doesn't have as big of punch outs. It's probably not going to fly quite as long as a counterpart just like this that doesn't have prop protection on. But some people want the prop protection from a safety standpoint. Some people want the prop protection because they feel it helps protect their motors and their props, and therefore the carbon fiber attached to those motors, because the frame takes the crashing abuse. Oh, speaking of crashes, I almost forgot. Let's take a look at a crash here that I recorded special just for this video. Almost forgot about this, but we're just going to go up over the tree. Just going to do a little bit of general flying. This was my most severe crash, or not this part. This is early in the flight run. I just kind of get tangled up, but I thought I would show that because kind of gives you an idea of what happens on a regular basis. I consider that a very mild crash. Funny little leaf got stuck in the mount, but we shake that loose here in a minute, and then we're going to jump to later on in the flight where essentially at this point I'm just going to finish out the flight and get more comfortable with it. But I am going to have a crash. My battery gets way too low, and as I approach the fence, I can just sense that, oh no, my throttle is not responding. And then I look down and I can see the low battery, and I think it even said land now. And it was too late. There was no way that I was going to be able to recover at this point. It was just a hope and a prayer as I come around the fence, and I smack right into it. There was no getting over the fence anymore. I was barely staying in the air. So I wanged it pretty hard there, and then you can see the battery crashing out. But that was my most severe crash, and you can see it barely, it kind of doesn't even show it. I mean, I've got some dirt and dust that's, down in here, but, not a big deal at all. There's no cracks or breakages in the frame that I found. The prop protection, that wasn't a really dramatic, I wasn't going full bore flat out into something hard, but that was kind of for what was left in the battery, an at speed crash directly into a nearly immovable object. But it was the most severe crash that I had. So I think, just to kind of wrap up, if you're looking for these and you want something, you can fly this inside. Don't get it wrong. I didn't, just because it's going to be a noise level inside that unless you're doing it for filming purposes or cinematography sort of purposes, I don't think most people would want to fly this inside unless you live by yourself and you're the only person that would get annoyed by it. If you live with others, I suspect the noise level would just be too much. It's 2S. It's got kind of a fairly high pitch to the props, which you can hear in my flight audio. So I did not do that because I didn't see that as something that would be very common. So this is primarily going to be an outside quad. Whether you want to fly it aggressively, sort of freestyle or cinematic, I think it did the job well. I do like the fact that the mount protecting this video system and camera has gotten more substantial than it has previously. It gives me a little bit more confidence that it wouldn't be as likely to tear off. Sorry, I had that kind of far left in the shot. But this feels like it's just more substantial than the older 03 version. And it feels like it's doing a better job of holding everything as well as protecting. And you can see, this was the camera angle. Hopefully you can see that I was flying in that more aggressive flight. And we've got more camera tilt with our screws that we can get out of that, along with this little opening in our hood where we could push that camera up even further if we wanted to. Now, if you put the camera down, I don't know if I have a recording or not of this, but if you put the camera down to like what looks to be, flat, you can see the prop protection in that. I don't know why you would ever want to have your camera exactly flat, because really then whenever you move forward or backwards, whatever it is that you're trying to film isn't going to be in your shot. It's not going to be centered. So at some point, you've got to have some camera angle to get your shot centered and to have a moving shot. Otherwise, you might as well just put a regular old camera up in the air. I don't know. Maybe I don't understand filming, and I don't get involved in any of that stuff. I've been asked a few times to do some of that stuff, and I don't. So don't take offense to what I'm saying, because I just don't understand. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't understand. But I think if you're looking for really either one of these, whether you fly the 03 or the 04, I think for the form factor, they fly fairly well. They are 3S, which separates them from others. So generally, versus the 2S counterparts, you're going to get a little bit more aggressive flight, and you're going to get a little bit more flight time, because it's going to be carrying a bigger battery, or a heavier battery, I should say. Bigger refers to capacity. These are going to have heavier batteries because they have that additional cell, because most of the others in this category are 2S. But if you are interested, now I of course would talk about price as I normally do, but it looks like right now they're not even selling these with 03s or 04s. You've got to supply them separately. So we're looking at about $105 for the kit without the camera and video system. Of course, that could change depending upon where you live, where tariffs stand in the moment, whatever Beta FPV might be doing to help ease some of the pain with tariffs. A de minimis that might be involved, and none of that, this might not be relevant later on. That's why it's typically something that I discuss at the end of videos, so you don't have to spend a lot of time looking for this. Is pricing information is so short-lived, it doesn't have a high amount of value, and I try to front load most of my videos so that you can get as much information in the time that you might have available in the moment. But as always, I will put a link to the Beta FPV website for this version, which is essentially the same. You just click on the different option depending upon what you want. Down in the video description is where you'll find that link. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them as best I can down in the comments section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.